Research is my passion. Muscle and strength are my pursuits. I'm a powerlifter, bodybuilder, scientist, and coach. I'm Layne Norton. I am a physique architect.
Don't stop.
Just like with squats, for the first half of my lifting career, I avoided deadlifts. They were hard, and I just didn't really want to do them. But once I finally decided that I needed to catch my back up to the rest of my body, I consistently started incorporating deadlifts, and it made all the difference. When I did my first series of natural pro shows in 2010, the judges couldn't believe the difference I'd made in back size and density. Now 5 years later, my back's gotten even bigger, and my deadlift's gotten even better. When I decided to consistently start deadlifting, I did a ton of research on proper form and how to execute the lift. But I also learned from some of the best people I know, including Ben Esgro, Dr. Mike Zourdos, and Matt Gary. Compiling all that information has led me to where I am today, and I'm going to use it to teach you how to deadlift more safely and efficiently. There are essentially two ways to deadlift, either conventional or sumo. In this video, I'm going to break down both. Before we get into breaking down the deadlift, I want to talk about useful pieces of equipment I recommend for deadlift. Footwear is very important for deadlifts. You're looking for three things. 1, you want something with a lot of grip. 2, you want something with a flat sole. And 3, you want something that's low to the ground. The lower to the ground you are, the less distance you have to pull the bar. If you're using something with a raised heel, you have to pull the bar further. Thus, I don't recommend squat shoes for deadlifting. Also, I don't recommend sneakers. They're probably the worst things you can wear. You want something with a hard sole. Sneaker sole is very soft, and you'll be losing energy transfer when you deadlift. I recommend things like deadlift slippers, wrestling shoes, or even Chuck Taylors. As with squat, a belt can be very helpful on deadlift. A belt gives you something to brace your abdominal wall against and keep you more upright as you complete the movement. I recommend a good 10 to 13 millimeter powerlifting belt. Most people wear their belt too low. I recommend wearing your belt just under your ribs, right where your abdominal wall pushes out when you brace during a lift. Belt tightness is a little bit up to the individual, but I don't prefer something so tight that you can't brace effectively, but you also don't want it so loose that it doesn't provide support. I recommend keeping it one notch off the absolute tightest setting that you can possibly go. As we'll discuss later, a straight bar path is very important during deadlifts. It is also important to keep the bar as close as possible to your body. This means that if you're not wearing long socks or tights, you're going to scrape your shins. In fact, it may leave you bruised and bloodied. Thus, I recommend wearing either knee-high socks, tights, or long pants during your deadlifts. Another piece of equipment that can be useful is straps. Now, if grip is a problem for you on deadlift and you're a competitive powerlifter, I recommend training without straps. But if grip isn't a problem, or you're just a bodybuilder who's looking to maximize muscle mass and doesn't want to worry about your grip, then straps can be very helpful. If you're not going to use straps on a deadlift, I recommend using chalk. It will enable you to get a better grip on the bar, making it easier to complete the lift. So now that we've discussed equipment, let's talk about the components that make up a good deadlift. First, I'm going to teach you how to set up for a conventional deadlift. Foot position is a little bit up to the individual, but in general, I would stand in the position where you can generate the most power, and that is typically where you'd be able to jump the highest in a standing vertical leap. Your hand position should be just outside of your shins. If you grip too wide, you're actually going to have to pull the bar a further distance, so you want it as close to your shins as you can. Optimal starting position will be with your shins at 90 degrees to the ground and your scapula over the bar. This ensures that you pull the bar in a straight line and generate maximum force. Just like on squat, before you begin the movement, you want to take in a deep breath and brace your abdominal wall. This is going to protect your spine and enable you to generate more force. Before you start the movement, you also want to pull the slack out of the bar by engaging your lats. Many people just jerk the bar off the ground, but this is incorrect. Jerking the bar off the ground is more likely to put whip into the bar and cause your lower back to round and prevent you from keeping a straight bar path. Now I'm going to show you how to set up for a sumo deadlift. Foot positioning on sumo deadlift is going to be more variable than on conventional, but you want to set up so that your shins end up at 90 degrees when you begin to pull. An easy way to find out where your foot position should be on sumo is to look into a mirror, get into your starting position, and then play around with different foot widths. Find the one where your shin is at 90 degrees to start the movement. On a sumo deadlift, you're also going to need to point your toes out. If you point your toes forward, your knees are going to be in the way, and it's going to be much harder to complete the movement. Your hand position should be a straight line down to the bar. The rest of the setup points for sumo are very similar to conventional. You want your shins at 90 degrees to the ground, you want your scapula over the bar, you want to breathe and brace, you want to engage your lats and pull slack out of the bar. Now that we've talked about deadlift setup, let's get into the execution of the conventional and sumo deadlift. Many of the cues for the execution of the sumo and conventional deadlift are very similar, but we're going to start with conventional. As we discussed in setup, you want to breathe in deep, brace your abdominal wall, and pull the slack out of the bar by engaging your lats. Initiate the movement by thinking about trying to bend the bar. That will engage your lats automatically, and then pushing the floor away from you. Think about a leg press. It's similar to your setup on a conventional deadlift. You've got your thighs close to your abdominal wall, and you're pressing the leg press away from you. So instead of the leg press, think about that being the ground. You're pressing the ground away from you. As soon as the bar leaves the floor, you want to think about squeezing your glutes and driving your hips forward. This is going to enable you to keep a straight bar path and lock out more effectively. Unlike in conventional, where you want to initiate the movement by pushing the floor away from you, in a sumo deadlift, you want to initiate the movement by thinking about spreading the floor apart. Once the bar has left the ground, you want to think about squeezing your glutes and driving your hips forward, just like you would on conventional. As you lock out, stand erect, but do not hyperextend your lower back. Just stand straight up and lock out your lower back. Once you're locked out, you don't want to just drop the weight, but you don't want to lower it too slowly either. Many people I've seen injure their lower backs have done so trying to lower the bar too slowly. This creates a lot of torque on your lower back. The easiest way to initiate lowering the bar is to unlock your glutes and let your hips drive back, and the bar should be lowered in a straight bar path almost identical to the one it came up in. One major point to note is that conventional and sumo deadlifts are not going to feel the same in terms of speed. A conventional deadlift is typically going to be very fast off the floor and slower to lock out, whereas a proper sumo deadlift is going to be slow off the floor and fast to lock out. Now that we've talked about how to properly execute conventional and sumo deadlifts, let's talk about some of the most common mistakes we see in the gym. The biggest and most dangerous mistake I see on deadlifts is rounding of the lower back, spinal flexion. This creates uneven pressure on the discs and is more likely to lead to a back injury. Another big mistake I see is the bar separating from the shin. The further away from your body the bar gets, the longer the moment arm and the greater the torque on your lower back. Keeping the bar as close to your shin as possible ensures that you can apply the maximum amount of force and move the bar more effectively and safely. Another mistake I see people making is not engaging their lats and pulling the slack out of the bar. This increases the whip that goes into the bar, the likelihood that the bar will separate from your shin, and increases the difficulty to lock out. Another mistake I see is people who lock their knees too early. While locking your knees earlier will help you get the bar off the ground faster, it will make it much more difficult to lock out because the bar will have separated from your shin, increasing the torque. Another really critical mistake I see people make is people who overdip their hips trying to squat the weight off the ground. The deadlift is not a squat. People who have long legs are not going to be able to get a lot of quadricep into the movement, especially on a conventional deadlift. Remember that in order to exert the maximum amount of force, the shins have to be perpendicular and the shoulder blades have to be over the bar. If you overdip your hips and lean too far back, your shoulder blades will be behind the bar. To initiate the movement and for the bar to come off the ground, the shoulder blades will now have to get back over the bar. This means you will have to come forward as you're starting the movement. Coming forward as you're starting the movement is one of the worst things that can happen. If you're coming forward as you start the movement, you are much more likely to have the bar separate from your shin, lock your knees too early, and round your lower back. While many people like to touch and go deadlifts, I do not. I see many people bouncing the bar off the floor, and with each rep, they get less and less tight and get in a worse and worse position. I recommend taking a split second to let the bar settle, make sure you're in a good position, and restart the movement. As with any movement, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. I recommend starting light, focusing on bar path and the cues we discussed, and getting comfortable with the movement before you really start getting heavy. Remember, deadlift is a high reward movement, but is also high risk if not done properly. Now I realize that's a lot of information to process at one time. That's why I recommend watching this video several times to pick up more and more tips. Along with this video, I recommend reading the detailed article here on Bodybuilding.com. For more great articles and videos from me and other great contributors, keep coming back to Bodybuilding.com.